Are you unfulfilled? For Dahlia, there were plenty of dreams and wishes she couldn't reach in her previous life. But now, born again, in a world where magic exists, and with new family that loves her, she finds passion in creating magical inventions. Just like her father, she wants to do all the things she couldn't do in her first life. She's living her best life, and even gets engaged, until one day, she loses it all. No longer engaged, no family left, she decides to wander outside of the town she grew up in. And it's there she meets a handsome knight who for some reason seems drawn to her. Will she truly find love and fulfillment in this life? Find out in the magical tale of Dahlia in Bloom. Let's get started and watch the story unfold. We see the typing of an office girl, and she's sending her emails to thank her clients for the purchase of the company's products. It is terribly unfortunate that the texture of the desk was the last thing she saw. This girl wasn't able to do a single thing she had wanted in life, but maybe if another life existed. Waking up in the morning, a young Dahlia walked downstairs to see her father, Carlo, tinkering with another invention of his. He had his work to do, and lifted his daughter up to see a magic device he'd been working on. In this world, magic devices are tools and objects. Everyone in the country uses them in their daily lives. The devices make everyone's lives a little easier. They can cool a room or make it warmer. For example, using a fire magic stone can create a light out of nowhere, and using a water magic stone can create a torrent of water. With the use of a wind magic stone, cleaning can be finished in a flash, and using stones in clever ways gives you different kinds of magic devices. Dahlia wondered if that was just like using magic, but her father assured her it wasn't. There are a limited number of people who can use magic well, but anyone can use magic devices. Her father then brought the device he was working on towards her, and with her turning the dial, it projected an array of light depicting many creatures moving around. And Dahlia stared in awe and excitement at the lights. People who create these devices are magic artificers, and that's her father's occupation. Hearing this, Dahlia desired to become one as well, so her father assured her that as long as she created great works, then of course she could. This made her really excited and determined to be one great artificer, just like him. On another day, Dahlia's friend Irma was intrigued to see the Dahlia space. It was her own workbench where she drew all of her ideas. However, with Dahlia's father needing to focus on work, he ushered the two to play outside. Dahlia was a little disappointed because she wanted to read the monster field guide inside the house with Irma, but she listened to her father and the two went outside to play. While working, Carlo stumbled upon Dahlia's magic device ideas, suddenly becoming fixated on the array of potential inventions her young daughter had come up with. The housekeeper, Sophia, then scolded Carlo, telling him Dahlia would get angry if he touched her things without asking. The Dahlia space was really important to her. Outside, as Irma brushed Dahlia's hair, Dahlia confirmed her determination to be a magic artificer. She asked what Irma would want for a device. Irma didn't want anything in particular, but would love a refrigerator since her home didn't have one. However, Dahlia wasn't interested in making things that already existed. Irma then brought up how she wanted to be a hairdresser when she got older. She practices with her own hair, but since it's so long, it takes a while to dry. That's when Dahlia's brain started clicking. She bolted inside and began drawing an invention that could help hair dry faster. Perhaps using a firestone and windstone, she could create something with warm wind that would make it easier to dry hair faster. Presenting it to her father, he saw the idea for a device that could make a warm spring breeze, which she had already named a hairdryer. She asked her father for permission to make it, but he lightly laughed, telling her she couldn't right now, but one day, which disappointed her because she wanted to make it right now. However, he did believe it was a good idea. She just needed more experience before she could build it. That evening, Carlo went to go visit his buddy, Theodore Orlando. Theodore thought Carlo's status as a doting father had reached its peak, with him giving his daughter a workstation before even starting primary school. Theodore felt that was somewhat dangerous. Carlo felt sure of himself, however, since he told Dahlia she couldn't use magic stones unless he was with her. But Theodore gave a good rule of thumb, stating children don't generally heed warnings the way parents think they would. He had already raised 2 children and learned his words carry a different weight. However, Carlo fell for the trap, thinking that Dahlia was special and wouldn't cause a problem. As the two men went back and forth about selling Dahlia's inventions in Theodore's shop, Dahlia was up to things in her room. That night, Carlo returned home and peacefully enjoyed a drink until he heard the screams of his daughter upstairs. He found her room engulfed in flames, and with quick thinking, equipped a magic device with a water stone to put the fire out. He then checked on his daughter, who began bursting into tears. He looked at the magic stone pile, noticing the empty fire stone. He asked why Dahlia would do such a thing, since he already told her if she was gonna use stones, he should be there with her. Still sobbing, she explained she wanted to make the hairdryer as a secret. She wanted to surprise her father, thinking he'd give her lots of praise. Carlo was a good man. He didn't get mad. He accepted that's just what a kid with passion was gonna do. Looking at her schematic, he could see the mechanism worked, but as it is now, the fire and wind come out at full blast. He hadn't taught her how to link output calculations and mixer circuits yet. He felt he could truly relate to his daughter though. As an inventor, when thinking of something, he himself couldn't stand not making it. Knowing some of the work of making magical devices can be dangerous, he made her aware there was still plenty he hadn't taught her yet, but assured her that until she was skilled enough to do things alone, they could just make things together, prompting her to embrace him and apologize over and over. That evening, the two got to work, and with the device shooting a flame out, it for sure couldn't be used for drying hair. But the build wasn't bad. Carlo determined it just needed a magic circuit to limit the energy to produce a nice, warm breeze. Hearing her father quickly find a solution, Dahlia praised him. The two continued to work on the device together throughout the night, and when morning came, he turned it on and the blow-drying worked successfully. The two cheered drinks to their victory. Sophia then arrived for her usual shift. Surprised to see the two up so early, Dahlia ran up to her, joyously mentioning they finished the hairdryer. But staying up all night, she fell asleep, holding Sophia where she stood. Sophia was not happy to hear Dahlia hadn't slept, however. On top of that, they hadn't bathed either. Gross. After putting Dahlia into bed, Sophia mentioned how once she had complimented Dahlia's hair, but Dahlia responded by wishing it was the same color as her father's. Looking at the hairdryer, Sophia was impressed that Dahlia could invent such a device at a young age, and Carlo shuddered mentioning his daughter's talent. She may be even more amazing than he is. Then, as Dahlia slept, she uttered, "Dad, what kind of magic device should we make next?" And he was pleased to hear her already thinking of her next invention. However, the piece had to end, because it was time for Carlo's scolding by Sophia. Time and seasons passed. Dahlia yawned as she put on her glasses. Still having trouble completing this fairy crystal lantern, Carlo came home after drinking, poking at his daughter who fell asleep at her desk again. She then headed to the kitchen to make breakfast, and Carlo pulled out a piece of paper, wondering if she'd be angry were he to take an apprentice who ranked above her. Eating breakfast together, Carlo asked his daughter if she had any new invention ideas. She had plenty, but 3 in particular that were detailed enough. He was proud of her, and she matter-of-factly stated, "Well, I am the daughter of Carlo Rossetti, the hot water device baron." He felt she'd be even greater though. He felt she'd one day become a magic artificer who'd leave her name in this kingdom's history, even if she couldn't imagine it herself at the moment. She then put on her bag, running outside to meet up with Irma and the rest of her friends. She overlooked the town, thinking one day she'd become a magic artificer who could make people happy, just like her father. Dahlia returned home from school today, excited to share her daily learning with her father, but was surprised to see he had taken in a new apprentice senior to her, Tobias Orlando, the son of Theodore who owned the Orlando Trade Company. Tobias had apparently been helping Carlo for a while now, while Dahlia delivered documents on behalf of her father late one night. Her father's friend, Ivano, spotted her taking cover from the rain, so he invited her inside, and they both started doing their impressions of Carlo. Ivano knew he'd say something like, "It's nearly the season for a cold ale," making Dahlia tease because her father drank far too much. But regardless, everyone respected him as an incredible magic artificer. He had even invented these lanterns that many people use. When people would thank him, all Carlo would ever say was, "Magic artificers think and build, and think and build. There's never an end in sight." And Dahlia laughed at Ivano's impression of him. The one she always liked to do was, "Make magical devices that people can safely use to enrich their daily lives. Seek to create magical devices that will make someone out there smile. Carlo was truly an amazing person that everyone loved. Dahlia came home to her father wiping himself off from the rain. She felt like he should have taken cover somewhere, but swore he was close enough to not get soaked. He and Tobias were a little less soaked, thanks to the fact that they wore jackets. But still, they had the sniffles. Looking at their soaked jackets though, Dahlia got inspired. She could make something to keep rain off better than any sand lizard coat. Perhaps a fabric that's handy, light, and can repel water. So, she decided to work on a raincoat. While immersed in her work as usual, Tobias was shocked she'd be using slimes as material for infusing magic. Dahlia had tried other monsters, but slimes were the only ones in particular that seemed water repellent. Her approach to inventions was always novel and creative. She tested a large variety of slimes, and with that being her sole focus, her friends Irma and Lucia thought she would plan to marry a slime at this point. Well, of course she wouldn't be marrying one, but still, green slimes adhered over a large area, but blue slimes were more water repellent. The fact that Dahlia wouldn't stop talking about them proved their point. Dahlia would have her friends try the prototype raincoats, of which she crafted many varieties. She and Tobias worked together, because he was also quite skilled. She worked so much, her father found her passed out at her workbench and placed a coat over to keep her warm. Reading some of her notes, he quickly picked up a solution and placed a solvent out as a hint she should mix them. She did exactly that, and crafted a material that was closer to what she was going for. Eventually, they crafted a fully functioning raincoat, and it was officially recorded as Dahlia's invention. Perfectly waterproof fabric and raincoats made of said fabric would now be paid royalties out to her. Exiting the record halls, Dahlia thanked Tobias for all his work, but he didn't feel like he did much, nor did he feel like he had her inventiveness or ability to focus, and under his breath, he said it pained him, although she didn't notice. Later, a rep from the Orlando company came to visit their home, because they were swarmed with orders of raincoats and rainproof fabrics. They worked tirelessly, especially since the fabric was now useful for wagon canopies. This even led to slimes being overhunted supposedly. At a tavern, Carlo and Theodore talked about the overwhelming success from the waterproof fabric. Carlo was grateful for Theo's company dealing with all the deals and mediation for them, while Theo complimented Dahlia's overwhelming talent. He's eager to see what she'll invent next. Theo then had some bad news. According to the doctors, he had less than a year to live. He planned on telling his wife soon, but she's not doing so well either. He was not worried about his eldest son, but more so Tobias. That's why tonight, he wanted Carlo to consider offering his daughter to marry Tobias. In return, Carlo would be allowed to use the Orlando company as a shield to protect Dahlia from things he's worried about. Carlo thought Tobias would be fine. He was quite capable. But the bad news got worse from here because Carlo also didn't have much time left either. So, he agreed to ask his daughter. The next day, Tobias and Dahlia signed this certificate of engagement, submitting it to the trade guild. They would be officially betrothed. Tobias was doing this to protect the Rossetti name, and Dahlia didn't think too much of it. However, this is when Tobias's insecurities started coming out, as he commented Dahlia was too tall with heels on. Irma was shocked to hear her best friend was engaged, and even though Dahlia seemed unaffected, Irma was concerned about how Dahlia felt for Tobias. Dahlia was objective, stating even though he was a merchant, he worked hard to become proficient at being a magic artificer. She thought that was wonderful, although it wasn't getting through to Dahlia's head that Irma was asking if she loved him. While Dahlia worked, Tobias commented her hair and glasses were a little too showy. He wanted her to wear plainer makeup, otherwise she might besmirch the Rossetti name, and she was fine with his request. It didn't bother her one bit. The two had lunch together later, where after Tobias heard how much his older brother and father praised her inventions, he somewhat aggressively placed his silverware down and told her not to drink so much while they were out. So, she apologized and agreed to it. Then suddenly, a representative from the trade company came by to tell them Tobias's father suddenly collapsed. He did pass, unfortunately, and with Tobias's older brother taking care of inventory in another country, there was no one else who could handle their business here. Dahlia calmed Tobias down, and the two worked together to maintain the company best they could. The seasons passed until one night, Dahlia met with her father at the tavern. He asked if she'd be drinking too. However, she abstained because of Tobias's request. Things at the Orlando company had been sorted out, thanks in part because of Carlo's input as well. Dahlia then remembered it was around this time last year Her father had gotten soaked in the rain and she began working on the raincoats. Carlo remembered the excited look on her face very well. For Dahlia, the words she lived by were her father saying she should always make magic devices that people smile for. That's when the idea came to her. Carlo thought whoever taught her that must be amazing. However, she felt that whoever should drink a little less. She then poured a glass, asking that her father keep it a secret from Tobias. Staring at the window one day with Ivano, Carlo began reminiscing on all the times he'd spent with his daughter. He loved her so much. She brought him incredible joy. And when he suddenly passed out on the floor with Ivano calling out to a doctor, all Carlo wondered was what kind of magic device she wanted to make next. Dahlia rushed to where her father was being held, discovering he had unfortunately passed. Ivano described him to have died the same way he always was, smiling and joking with a gentle expression. That night, she cried over his workbench, and the dust she carried flowed at his funeral. When everyone left, she stayed behind to watch his grave, even in the rain. Even so, life moves on. Dahlia smiled, looking at the same kind of device her father had shown her as a little girl, and took off. She was happy to see Tobias, who asked her to bring her unsigned marriage papers. But before she could sign them, he apologized because he wanted to break off their engagement. He's found true love with someone else. And this left Dahlia's jaw wide open. Things quickly became somber. Dahlia asked with whom. Tobias answered, Emilia Tellini, the Orlando company's receptionist. Dahlia then quickly got up, accepting the dissolution of their engagement, and they could have their forms on that finalized tomorrow at the trade guild. However, Tobias still had a shameful look because there was more he needed to request of Dahlia in regards to Emilia. Both Irma and her husband Marcella were mad to learn that Tobias and his new girl would be living at Dahlia's new house. He and Dahlia had been engaged for 2 years at this point. So how could he bring along the woman he'd been having an affair with? Dahlia was fine. Well, as fine as a woman in this situation could be. Tobias didn't make her cry, and she felt glad Irma and her husband felt angry on her behalf. She just didn't want to deal with moving her furniture out of the new house. So, Marcella was nice enough to take on the task. Dahlia then told Lucia next. Lucia was concerned if Dahlia was alright as well, but felt it made sense. She always knew Dahlia wasn't in love with Tobias either. The two had always spoken to each other with familial tendencies. However, Dahlia never spoke particularly lovingly of him. The only fun talk they had was about magic devices or monster materials. The time reached 2 o'clock, and at the trade guild, they had the vice chair of the guild, Gabriella, and Ivano, the original administrator of the contract, there as witnesses for the engagement voiding, and also Dominique, serving as the notary. First, Dahlia and Tobias's joint bank account was closed and liquidated. Then, Tobias paid Dahlia reparations, being the one responsible for dissolving their engagement, and 28 out of the 50 gold she had put down on their house, as he needed more time to gather the rest. The notary recommended not accepting this, as changing house ownership before full payment could be troublesome. Dahlia followed these words, and this made Tobias burst out, since he promised Emilia she could live with him immediately. Gabriella calmed him down, because surely as someone inheriting his father's company, he could just pull from the company funds. After that ordeal, Ivano asked Dahlia if Tobias had always been so brash in nature, but personally, she'd never seen him act this way before. I think there were plenty of signs this guy was gonna be controlling and impulsive, to be honest. Even moving her stuff out, Tobias had ruined the new bed they had bought together and filled the house with Emilia's things before he was legally allowed to. Dahlia eventually moved everything out and returned to the home she had always known. Irma's husband offered Dahlia dinner at their place, but she refused. So he gave Dahlia a gift on behalf of Irma, knowing she'd probably refuse. Everyone wished Dahlia well, and if it wasn't her personally, it was all the adults who held a debt of gratitude to her father. She began unpacking, and by the time it was over, she was exhausted. She thought back to how her engagement was always something hers and Tobias's father had decided. But now that she's lost her dad and his backing, since Tobias had found a woman he loved, this would have naturally happened. She didn't feel the need to cry about it. In her previous life, her last memory was the texture of an office desk. She lived with her head down and had died the same way. Which is why, in this life, to prevent that from happening again, she tried to become a good wife. She worked so hard to make sure she wouldn't end up alone. But this is how things ended up. Dahlia then spotted a fire jewel and it gave her the strength to not want to keep her head down anymore. From now on, she wanted to say what she liked and didn't like. Fortunately, she loved her work as a magic artificer. She didn't have to force herself to be with anyone. She wanted to live her second life the way she wanted, as best as she could. Eating the food that Marcella gave her, it reminded Dahlia of her father. Were he still here, she's sure he'd have also been angry, drinking, and helping her laugh this whole thing off. He would have ruffled her hair and told her to eat up. She spotted a treat from Lucia as well, and it reminded Dahlia again of all the people who were there for her. So, she toasted to them and her father. While Irma fixed up Dahlia's hair, she mentioned with Amelia being a nobleman's daughter, she must have deliberately left her pendant on Dahlia's dresser. It pissed Irma off. Because women who steal men are very calculative, she felt Dahlia had more of a right to be angry. Dahlia agreed, but amidst all the paperwork, she kind of stopped caring. She wanted to forget as quickly as possible. Irma told her, fair enough. Any man with so little confidence that he'd force a woman to look plainer should be forgotten immediately. And that's facts, y'all. Irma was confident Dahlia would find someone better soon enough. Dahlia wasn't interested in romance at the moment, but was happy to see her bright red hair again. Afterwards, the two had coffee and cake, and when the evening hit, Dahlia planned to be holed up in her tower for a while, now inspired to invent more things. Tomorrow, she was even thinking of gathering in the forest for more materials. The next day, she disguised herself as a man and put on a voice-shifting device to sound like one as well. She was well prepared, with a magic-throwing stone to deal with monsters, and a knife as a bandit deterrent. Reaching the forest, she suddenly stopped her horse, noticing a flock of birds flying away. A man in red armor fell out of the bush in front of her, desperately begging for water. Dahlia gave the man some and he thanked her before falling over. Her deepest concern was the injury on his left shoulder. She quickly concocted a potion and gave it to the man, and his wounds went all away. He promised to pay her back when he returned to the royal capital. He then gracefully introduced himself as Wilfred Scalfarato, a member of the Knight's monster suppression force. Also, the youngest child of a low-ranking noble, and Dahlia was a little taken aback by his handsome looks. Dahlia introduced herself as, Dahlia, just your plain old regular citizen, totally not a girl. Wilfred then asked to hitch a ride back to the capital, and Dahlia courteously obliged. Riding back together, Wilfred commented that the waterproof fabric seat cushions were certainly useful. Since he had monster blood all over him, he was initially concerned he'd get the seats dirty. Back when he'd first joined the Knights, they had to manually wax their tents. It was a lot of work, but now that waterproof fabric exists, life has become a lot easier. He enjoyed the waterproof raincoats as well, but noted the durability to be somewhat of an issue, making Dahlia's head turn with the idea of inventing ones with a new material. They made a quick stop by the river, so Wilfred could wash the blood from his eyes. And after seeing his face clean, Dahlia became more fixated on Wilfred's beautiful eyes. With him taking his armor off, she got nervous and had to turn away from him. While Wilfred continued to clean up, Dahlia prepared their meal, a drying rack for Wilfred's clothes, and offered one of her father's old coats to him. Seeing him fully clean, Dahlia again had to turn away, refocusing on the fact that they should eat. During their meal, Dahlia inquired about Wilfred's scarlet armor. He took the position of vanguard since he was quick on his feet. She knew those who wore the red armor in the suppression force had the deadliest job, since the armor made them stand out so much. They'd often be used as a distraction to attract the monsters. She truly felt sympathy knowing men in Wilfred's position were likely to die. Trying to make small talk, Wilfred brought up that if he forgot that his coat was all he was wearing, he might accidentally take it off in front of a lady in town without thinking, and get taken away by the guards as a pervert. This made Dahlia spit out her drink, because, well, she actually is a lady. But Wilfred couldn't help but crack a joke to clear this mood. He knew Dahlia had given him a concerning look, but assured her his job wasn't as dangerous as the rumors said. She had looked at him so sadly, he just wanted to say something silly. Wilfred then asked more about Dahlia's love for magic devices, because he was interested in one made into a sword. She couldn't think of a sword in particular, especially since the only people who could imbue weapons with magic were mages and alchemists. Magic artificers did make knives, however, commonly imbued with anti-rust and ever-sharp magic, something Wilfred pointed out would be incredibly useful on a sword. The two continued conversing about swords, with Wilfred particularly exclaiming his captain's sword called the Ash Hand. Anything it impales burns and instantly turns to ash. He was quite enticed by the idea of having one. The two continued their journey forward, where Dahlia brings up a white wine she had forgotten to finish. She offered it to Wolfred, who began to quickly guzzle it down. White wine was his weakness apparently. It began raining harshly, where Dahlia dropped Wolfred off. He thanked her for the ride and offered to pay her back, but she said it was alright. He then offered her drinks later, so she told him to say hi if they ever saw each other around town. That's when she'd be willing to take up his offer. And as he shouted his goodbyes while she was taking off, she smiled, having been glad to have met him. Making it back home, Dahlia couldn't stop thinking about the night. But since the capital was so big, she assumed they'd never meet again. The next day at the trade guild, Dahlia was surprised to learn some magic hobs she invented were registered in Tobias's name. They were just as surprised on the guild end, because Tobias had claimed she consented to it. Vice Chair Gabriella then entered to apologize as well, learning about the situation, and should Dahlia wish it, she could sue Tobias for contract fraud. However, Dahlia didn't want to do that. She wanted to talk this out with Tobias and have him void the contract himself. Otherwise, he might besmirch her father's name as his apprentice. Bringing everything she heard forward to Tobias, he apologized, saying it was all a misunderstanding. He had done it assuming they were going to start a new company together after marriage, so he had all the registrations set under his name by default. Dahlia was pissed because in the trade of being a magic artificer, all devices should have the name of the inventor carved into them. This is the way her father taught the both of them. Since the devices were only being registered in his name, she'd never hear about if her inventions caused any problems or accidents. She demanded that he, of course, void the contract for the magic hobs by the end of the day. Tobias objected somewhat shamefully, reminding her that's something she made while they were still engaged. He asked to leave the registration as is and offered to buy the rights from her, but Dahlia refused, and then threatened him with a lawsuit. This made Tobias ask if she resented him because he broke off their engagement. She responded that as an artificer, she found the fact that he changed their registration more lamentable, and that she always thought of him as her father's senior apprentice. It became evident that Tobias was the one full of resentment. Dahlia had always seen him as her senior apprentice more than as her fiancé. After ending her business with the Orlando Trading Company, Tobias confided in his new fiancée, Amelia. He was still down about the fact Dahlia never loved him. Back at the Trade Guild, learning Dahlia's future business ventures with the Orlando Trading Company were dissolved, Ivano got right on it to find her a new company. Marcella then showed up, and hearing the news, he thought it'd be a good idea if she made her own Rossetti company. Dahlia thought the idea was nice, but she needed 4 guarantors to receive approval. So, the first to stake his name in it was Marcella. Then, a man who overheard them named Mizena Grieve, as he wanted to be an investor given she was the one who invented the waterproof fabrics that changed the transport business forever. Then, Ivano, who also hoped to profit. And then finally, Gabriella in her Viscount husband's name. Dahlia was pretty hesitant, since she was just starting out as a full-fledged artificer. But now hearing she could get all the rare materials she's always wanted to work with, like fire dragon scales and sea serpent hides, she became certainly more enticed. Gabriella then began guiding Dahlia on how to properly be a company chairman. First, by starting with her appearance. Dahlia needed to dress to impress, and learn to do her makeup. Gabriella had done all of this as a thank you to Dahlia's father, because he was the one who introduced her to her husband. Dahlia's father had told Gabriella that if his daughter had ever had trouble as an artificer or as a woman, to give her advice. Dahlia was still surprised to hear her father looking out for her, even to this day. Gabriella thought of Carlo as a patient man who listened to the trouble of others and gave advice. And Dahlia was surprised again, thinking all he did was wander around and drink. We turned to Wolfred, sending in his report. Since he took down a wyvern, he had rightly earned the title of Dragon Slayer. His captain wanted to recommend him to the Royal Guard, but with Wolfred refusing once again, this only frustrated the captain. There was one thing Wolfred wanted, however. He requested a letter of introduction to the Trade Guild, because he wanted to thank the person who saved him with a potion. His plan was to hopefully meet Dahlia at a restaurant or tavern soon. Outside at a restaurant, Dahlia takes off her glasses, now finally able to see clearly after getting a somewhat expensive eye surgery. She suddenly notices the people all gasping in awe as the dashing Wolfred comes walking through towards her. He at first asks if she's a relative of Mr. Dahlia, but before she can answer, he already suspects that it's her. Just like I suspect you need to like this video and subscribe to my channel. Here on My Shoujo Weekly, we've got plenty of romance anime in the isekai genre just like this one. So come on, hit that subscribe and give me a like. Dahlia thought it was incredible he figured it out, but to Wilfred, it was obvious. The way she averted her eyes seemed odd. Plus, her eye color and smell were exactly the same. Smell? After he explained she smelled the same as the cart, she made a quick sniff of herself. Sitting down with her, he explained he was actually heading to the trade guild to look for her. He planned to ask if they knew anyone who fit her description. He wanted to repay the cost of the potion and to return her coat. So, to repay, he wanted to treat her to today's meal. Dahlia was a little hesitant, so Wilfred quoted her words. "If you see me around town, come say hi. I'll take you up on your offer then." She had no choice but to accept. While Wilfred ordered with elegance, Dahlia was lost in his looks, until he decided to make small talk with her. When they met in the forest, he didn't realize how beautiful she was. She nervously thanked him for the lovely, conversation-starting compliment. He then asked why she was dressed as a man back then, so she reasoned a woman alone in the forest isn't very safe. Then, their wine came and they toasted to their reunion. They had a fancy assortment to eat with their meal, and while chatting, Wilfred apologized for using the coat that was a memento to her late father. She then fully introduced herself as Dahlia Rossetti, making Wilfred surprised to learn he had been chatting about waterproof fabric to an expert in the field. On top of that, learning she's the one who invented the fabric. This made him thank the gods for their fated meeting. He then decided to step away to get more wine, and while away, this peace wasn't meant to last, as Tobias and Amelia appeared. Dahlia tried to look away, only for Amelia to get up in her face. Amelia wanted to apologize for being the one who dissolved Dahlia's engagement, but Tobias told her there was no need. This was such an embarrassing scene for Dahlia. Wilfred came back and asked if she had any lingering feelings, but of course, there were none at all. That's when he replied, "If your engagement has been broken, then you are currently unattached, yes? I give my thanks to the goddess of fortune, as had you not accepted my invitation, I was quite dismayed, but now, meeting you once more brings me heartfelt joy." Tobias wanted to know who this guy was, so Wilfred introduced himself as a knight of the royal palace, and the son of the Earl of Water. He then took Dahlia away, and she thanked him for getting her out of there while leaving Tobias and his new woman stupefied. She was so surprised by how smooth he was. Wilfred told her he was being honest though, and was a little worried he made her join him against her will. But no, she came along happily, explaining her previous engagement was something set up by her father. Before they had gotten married, Tobias found his true love anyways. Wilfred never really considered the idea of true love before, and with Dahlia smiling, holding his hand saying she was in the same boat without thinking, they both pulled away from each other, somewhat embarrassed. The two then decided to have a meal in a loud tavern, where Wolf deployed an anti-eavesdropping device, so that way they could speak freely. Dahlia was surprised that the son of a famous earl would need to speak freely. However, Wilfred didn't want to ride his family's coattails. He was the youngest, and thus had been left on his own with no one guarding or shadowing him. He's never truly been comfortable with formality. Dahlia wasn't too familiar with noble manners either, so she was fine with this. She then started talking about the device, being intrigued by it. We learned that's not something she would make, since she only makes things that enhance everyday life. Wilfred commented on her excitement, making her blush. The compliments and his now lax manner of speaking really threw her off. This was something he couldn't help though, wishing his looks matched his casual personality. Normally, he wears a coat and glasses, but today, he dressed to stand out, hoping she would be able to find him. Now she felt bad, thinking she should have told him her name and arranged it so he could have contacted her through the guild. But Wilfred thought nothing wrong with her actions, saying he really only wanted to speak to her again. While having dinner, the two talked of their passions. For Dahlia, of course, it was new inventions, and Wilfred, it was magic swords. After they cheered, he asked that she call him Wolf, to which she found referring to someone of noble status so casually to be difficult. But he had his reasons. Even being from House Scalfarado, he couldn't use the 5 fundamental magics, and one day, he'd be living in town with everyone else. Calling him Wolf would be like practice for his future life. Dahlia then agreed, but only when it was the two of them around. Wolf walked Dahlia home, and learned her place was known as the Green Tower. Long ago, there was a wall for the royal palace near here. When they tore it down, her grandfather was allowed to take the stones and he built it. Wolf thought it to be a fitting home for an artificer. Then, he pulled out the gift of money that he really wanted her to accept. He then asked to visit her tomorrow to return the coat, and go to a special magic device shop in the North District with him called Right Eye of the Goddess. Dahlia knew that was an exclusive shop that was invitation only. She was happy to go, and after wishing him good night, he wished her the same. In her dreams, Dahlia remembered her father drinking happily next to the air conditioner. She really always thought of him to be joyful and lazy. Later in the morning, she was surprised the wolf showed up at her gate a little early. He started his journey here early since it was quite far from his place. Guess he was a little too fast. The two rode together, and being gentlemanlike, he took her hand getting off the cart. But this made both of them a little nervous. As he was about to put on his glasses, some girls began screaming over how gorgeous he was. So he apologized to Dahlia for causing a scene, but it didn't bother her. Inside the shop, Dahlia marveled over the sight of the exquisite inventions. She learned the owner was a baron named Oswald Zolba, and immediately recognized him to be the one who invented the air conditioner. Oswald greeted the two, and after learning she was Carlo's daughter, we learned the two had gone to secondary school together, and often saw each other at baron gatherings. Dahlia and Oswald became engrossed in their magic device talk, even leaving Wolf behind accidentally. He then presented Wolf with some magic bracelets he had ordered, and while Wolf was getting them resized in the back, Oswald used this opportunity to give Dahlia her own membership to enter the shop anytime she wanted. He apparently owed a debt to Carlo. Carlo had once said, "If my daughter ever comes to your shop, I hope you'll show her your magic devices. But if she never does, then keep it a secret until you die." Oswald was glad now, so when he would eventually meet Carlo in heaven, he could tell him he repaid his debt. Dahlia wanted to know more, so Oswald explained when he was young, his wife eloped with a worker from the shop and took all his money with her. He debated whether he should close shop or take on a large amount of debt, and that's when Carlo came by. At a drinking stall, he told Carlo everything. Carlo lectured him, saying the best thing to do was find a new woman. Dahlia could hardly believe it, but Oswald went further, explaining Carlo had a beloved young lady of his own. She wondered what kind of boast this was. But after having that drink, Carlo brought him to the Green Tower, where Oswald had met a young Dahlia, truly a beautiful young lady, and seeing the two brought him joy. Carlo had told him his daughter was prone to heat rashes, because a lack of airflow made the tower hot. That's when Oswald invented the air conditioner to help with that. And thanks to the success of that invention, he was able to rebuild his shop. However, he found it unfortunate that he was only able to drink with Carlo at baron gatherings. Had he known Carlo was gonna pass soon, he would have invited him out more, but wondered if Carlo had this mutual feeling of friendship the way he did. Dahlia brought closure to Oswald though, explaining her father would drink in front of the air conditioner all the time. He'd often even cheer to Oswald's name. Dahlia was certain it was like her father was drinking with him. Hearing Carlo had done that all along brought tears to Oswald's eyes. This was another person touched by the great hot water baron. Oswald then shook her hand, telling Dahlia to come back anytime. Outside the shop, Dahlia flipped to the back side of her membership card to see her father's handwriting. She thought back to how sloppy he seemed coming back home from his nights of drinking, and cried, saying it wasn't fair that he only showed her his good side after he was gone. Sitting down for a drink, Dahlia was able to confide in Wolf, never imagining she'd hear stories about her father in a shop like that. It had been a year at this point since he passed. Wolf then asked to accompany Dahlia in future visits to the shop, not because Dahlia had done anything inappropriate, but because as a noble, Oswald had no qualms about taking on multiple wives. He already had 2 around Dahlia's age, and Wolf was afraid Oswald would try to woo her too. However, she denied any chance of that happening. The two continued their day together, deciding to head to a stall area for lunch in the central district. Dahlia got them porchetta and crespel, while Wolf bought them ale. And man, does that look good. Much to Dahlia's surprise, Wolf presented a resistance ring for her, especially desiring her to wear it whenever they go out to eat, because someone might try to poison her in order to get to him, since he came from nobility, of course. I thought this to be a romantic gesture, however, the two saw it as something platonic and nothing more. Eating the food, Wolf took a liking to it better than the restaurants he ate at. Dahlia was glad he liked it, since it was also a favorite of her father's. With the drinks getting empty, Wolf thought they could go for another round, so Dahlia took it upon herself to buy more, even though he offered first, probably because of the disguise he had to wear. Seeing a little boy happily drag his mom around, Wolf reminisced of his own mother, who was a courageous knight and inspiration. By the food stalls, Dahlia was getting harassed by a random man. Wolf was going to jump in to save her. However, Dahlia struck first using a magic bracelet to summon an ice pillar, scaring off the man who then mistaked her as a mage. The people around her thought she was pretty amazing, with the shop owner presenting 2 ales for her and her boyfriend. Dahlia looked over, thanking the vendor but responding next time she and her friend would come together. Dang, he got friend-zoned. Back at their bench, Wolf apologized, thinking he should have really got them refills. But Dahlia was fine, especially since she'd been wanting to test the freezing ring anyway. This gave her the idea to fuse freezing magic into a sword. Speaking of swords, Wolf was going to pick his up from the weapon shop on the way back. Dahlia then asked to join him since her father had never let her go to a weapon shop before. He forbade her after a particular incident where, attending the academy, she got burned by a slime. Her mind had wandered, developing the waterproof fabric, and she mixed a black slime by hand. Wolf was shocked to hear this, knowing black slimes caused a terrible burn. Her hands must have been so badly eroded the bones were visible, but her father covered them so she never saw them before they got healed by the church. Once again, having done something to protect her, since if she had seen her bones, she may have died from shock. Wolf felt now he could somewhat relate to the look of concern she felt for him, seeing his scarlet armor that attracted monsters. Back at the Green Tower, the two had dinner and talked all night long. Wolf decided to help her clean, even though he didn't have to. Dahlia then asked if he wanted to pop another bottle, or if he had a curfew to get home to. He didn't, and in fact, part of him wanted to talk more, but another part didn't want to impose. Dahlia didn't mind at all though, making him now think she wasn't wary enough of people. For a man like him, he believed it'd be more appropriate to toss him out, and for her to talk to him from above a window. She thought there was no need though, as long as he behaves. She knew he wouldn't try to flirt with her. That's why she invited him in. The both of them were stupid about romance, since Dahlia had always been absorbed in magical devices, while Wolf had been with swords. Truthfully, she was the first woman he could speak to so closely. All his friendships tended to collapse because of issues involving women. There was a girl a friend of his liked that turned out to be in love with him, and thus killed their friendship. Then, another friend's girlfriend declared she loved him, and their friendship fell apart. Another friend's sister kept making advances towards him, even though she had a fiancé. When Wolf turned her down, she lied and said he pursued her, and his friend believed his fiancé punched him, thus ending another friendship. These days he attends parties with a dowager duchess, who is like an aunt to him. The duchess's husband's guard was one Wolf's mother served in. The woman had always looked out for him. Dahlia then asked if he really hated his face that much, to which he responded, "Yes, I loathe it. At the church, I was told my eyes are a blessing from the gods. They say golden eyes attract people's favor, but these days, I think what they meant was greed." Dahlia then thought to solve this problem by giving him a way to cover up his eyes. She wanted to help him by developing a magic device. Her plan was to imbue some glasses with a fairy crystal, since it had the ability to block perception, so maybe it could change the way others saw his eyes. This would be a difficult challenge, so she wanted him to think of it as an experiment. She got to work, imbuing fairy crystal solvent into some lenses. It was her father's words that reminded her she needed to speak to the materials as she casted with them, ask where they want to go, what angle they prefer, as a way for her and the device to understand each other. The fairies within the crystal solvent asked her what she desired, to which she answered for Wolf's sake, a way for his eyes to be less conspicuous. The fairies wondered why, since his eyes were so pretty, and she responded, to protect him from greed and malice. But now shaking as she saw the darkness manifest around him, her wish was for this device to protect Wolf, so he could smile. The fairies agreed, as long as she could safely guide them to the light. While dealing with malicious darkness that consumed all, she came to, sweating. Wolf suggested she take a break, but the first lens was successfully created, so she wanted to continue before she lost focus. She went right back in, getting consumed by darkness right away, protecting the fairies, but ultimately succeeding and presenting him the glasses. In a mirror, his eyes now came off green, the way Dahlia imagined her father's would, making Wolf so grateful that he may be able to walk around town more normally now. Dahlia was certainly glad, although she nearly fainted from running out of magical energy. Walking around town on another day, Wolf was finally able to enjoy a normal stroll. He sat down, thinking back to when his mother had protected him during a bandit raid when he was younger. She died that day, and after losing her, he grew up in an unstable environment. Girls had looked at him affectionately, while boys were usually jealous of him. He devoted himself to the sword in an effort to break free, and after joining the Monster Suppression Force, the unit least concerned with social standing, things became a lot easier. Even now, with relationships and a life that are good enough for what they are, like a blessing and a curse, he still had nightmares from the day his mother was slain. He often wondered if he had a magic sword, would he be able to save his mother in that dream? Even if all he inherited was her appearance and not her outstanding magic? Looking at his new pair of glasses, he truly thought Dahlia to be remarkable. Only having met 3 times now, she's changed his life. Her face as an artisan, serious, covered in sweat, makeup coming off, was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. However, he felt this wasn't love, and that she didn't want that. He wanted to stay by her side with simple camaraderie and respect, as one of her friends. Elsewhere, we turn to Tobias, who was a complete mess as his older brother, Araneo, asked what about Dahlia made him unhappy. If it was just a matter of taste in women, then so be it. However, Araneo knew their relationship dissolving also removed all their company's ties with the nobility. Apparently, Amelia is the child of a Viscount's younger brother and maid. The Viscount's family paid her a tidy sum at the time, but now they've officially cut all ties with her, with documentation proof. Tobias, shaken, said he didn't care, claiming Amelia was still Amelia. Araneo didn't care one bit, but if they caused any trouble with that family, their company would ultimately get shut down, which was certainly surprising news for Tobias. Araneo then explained the reason their parents wanted him to marry Dahlia. Their father Theo was the one who asked Carlo, because there wasn't anyone at their company who could carry Tobias as an artificer. Tobias was in disbelief, asking why Carlo would agree to this, only to learn this was in self-interest as well, because a skilled artificer with no family like Dahlia would be a constant target for unsavory people, so they contrived a way for their company to protect the two so they wouldn't stand out. Tobias was hurt, learning he was basically a smokescreen to protect Dahlia as an artificer. Carlo had even often said he wanted the two of them to support each other as artificers, making him break down further. Later, Wolf came back to Dahlia's place to deliver his thanks for the glasses with money and a special certificate. A certificate to declare Dahlia as a friend that was also officially notarized? Isn't this a little far? While heading out, Dahlia decided to invite him over for another time, where she tried to infuse magic with a sword and he was excited. Sometimes, people made fun of her for just being a magic artisan. She couldn't use showy magics like mages could. She couldn't make rare metals or recovery potions like an alchemist could. Development was done through trial and error, and even creating a good magic device, there's no guarantee anyone would need it. Even so, the devices she made might come in handy for someone or make them smile. Seeing that moment was so much fun, and she couldn't get enough of it. Today was one of those moments. With Wolf being deployed on a monster hunting campaign, he's had to move spending time with Dahlia to a later date. Back at home, while Dahlia continued to work producing new inventions, such as Kraken tape and a modern refrigerator, the thought of Wolf's safety happened to cross her mind. She hoped for his safe return. Then, with the sudden loudness of thunder or boom, she got a little spooked but observed the pending rainy weather to be. Back on the fields, the Monster Suppression Force scouted the area for their goblin targets. None of the magic they could use would work without damaging the land, and noting the goats from the nearby village had been taken, it was only a matter of time until the people were the next victims. Wolf actually suggests a plan where he breaks away from their force to draw out the goblins himself. The captain is surprised to hear Wolf suggest a strategy for once, as he's known more normally to make moves that put his life in jeopardy without thinking. The captain is very excited at the growth he's displayed, even wanting to promote Wolf into a leadership role in the future. But little did he know, Wolf had a woman on the line as motivation to drive himself to return to her quickly. After the sun set, Wolf got quickly to work, and there was nothing left of the monsters except a pile of ash, now only used as a bonfire. As the suppression force celebrated, the soldiers couldn't help but admire Wolf's incredible contribution in this last fight. Dahlia was surprised to see Wolf arrive another day with a ton of crates. They contained meat, fish, vegetables, and fruit. wine, and cheese. Dahlia was still nervous with the excessive amounts of food. However, Wolf completely missed those feelings, only stating that this was alright since he had an ice magic stone attached that would preserve all the foods he brought better. Hey, is he sure they're just friends? With Wolf curious about the new refrigerator, he'd never seen one with 2 tiers before. Surprised to learn it was both a fridge and freezer in one, but she was still working out the kinks. With it still being a prototype, she was going to try it out in her kitchen upstairs. Since it was so heavy though, she thought about asking her friend from the Transport Guild to move it for her. No need though, because Wolf took it upon himself to move it, picking it up like it was nothing, noting it to be much lighter than he thought. Dahlia couldn't help but utter, "Wow." Finally relaxing, watching Wolf take great care of his glasses she made for him brought a smile to her face. She then opened up one of the crates to see special wine glasses he bought for her imbued with magic. She wanted to know how much she paid, and hearing it was 4 gold coins, she let off a deep sigh. She didn't know how to feel about such an extravagant gift. However, it was a thank you from Wolf for the glasses. Still though, Dahlia insisted as a friend she'd rather not be in the position of simply receiving without reciprocation. Wolf then understood when she put it like that, so she sold him the glasses at 2 coins a pair to compensate for the wine glasses he gave her. And thus, they made a totally platonic, non-romantic trade with no feelings whatsoever. The two then cooked their dinner together, and Dahlia really enjoyed the high-quality meat Wolf brought. He was just as excited though, eating it from the precise heat control of the burners she invented. He complimented her small magic hob, thinking if he had it around during his campaign, many of his comrades would still probably be with him. A lot of guys quit the forest because of the bad-tasting food. Dahlia then noticed Wolf hadn't eaten a single green pepper, to which he commented he wasn't a big fan of them. In response, she remarked, "Plenty of children dislike green peppers, don't they?" And man, the look on his face. He immediately fried one right away to avoid being a child in her eyes. And even though she said it was fine because everyone's tastes were different, he felt he must overcome it as a wall blocking his path. Eating the pepper, he was astonished by the delicious taste. Was it the fact he'd grown older? Or maybe that it was suggested by someone he likes? Either way, now that they finished their meal, it was time to get to magic sword crafting. Wolf was so excited. To start, she had him take the sword apart. She then applied ever-sharp magic to the blade of the short sword. Next to be applied, a water magic stone on the guard for cleansing, a wind magic stone on the hilt for swiftness and weight reduction on the scabbard. She was struggling a bit with the scabbard in particular, but then remembering a technique her father used, she got it down perfectly. Trying to attach the blade back to the hilt, Wolf struggled, questioning if imbuing magic might have altered the size of the pieces. However, Dahlia assured him magic didn't do that. Putting considerable effort to reattach, the blade suddenly flung away. Dahlia then surmised there must be a reason why no one has done this before. There must be an issue with magical affinity that changes the materials somehow. So, if magical affinities repelled each other, then her next idea was to wedge a material that would cut the magic between the 2 parts. She then excitedly remembered Wolf mentioning the black slime material that's resistant to all elements. That might be the solution to their problem. However, Wolf was hesitant with the dangerous material. Dahlia thought it was fine though. She had gloves that could withstand acid. Plus, he was here for her. She then put the materials into the black slime solvent, and after it adhered, she asked him to try putting the sword together again. It attached smoothly with no problem, although looking less magical and more demonic. Wolf thought it was very cool though, like something a Demon King's subordinate might carry. With a single cut test, Wolf could feel the power emanating, but holding the sword too long made his gloves begin to smoke. The magic was overpowering. One wrong move could melt the user's hands. They then tossed a piece of meat on it, and it didn't just melt, it disintegrated. No way was Dahlia gonna let him use this. She wanted to get it disposed of by a specialist. However, Wolf wanted to keep it sealed with magic, as a way to remember the first ever magic sword they made together. Afterwards, they toasted with glasses of wine. He definitely wanted a drink, knowing they wouldn't be able to until after his next campaign. In 2 days, they'd be starting the frog hunt this time of year as they always did. Hearing last year they had dealt with over 500, Dahlia thanked him for his service. What's even worse though is the heat. There's no wind in the marshland, and they use fire magic so it gets unbelievably hot. Not to mention how swampy their shoes get. A lot of soldiers end up with fungal infections. Hearing this, Dahlia gave something to Wolf that might help him with these issues. She didn't want payment, but rather a written report from him that might help her with a future finished product. Not having seen him for 3 weeks now, the Dowager Duchess Wolf mentioned earlier, Althea, asked if anything fun had happened recently. He explained a lot had happened, and returning home from vacation, he had met a delightful woman. The Duchess remarked it was rare to hear him say such things, and asked more about the details and wished him safety on his campaign. Looking at the photo she kept in a locket of her deceased husband, she wonders if Wolf knew he was on the verge of catching a deathly fever of love. Would it cool quickly? Would it break him? Would he take this romance to his grave? She looked forward to seeing how it would play out. Out in the fields after taking off the socks Dahlia gave him, Wolf's jaw literally dropped. Dahlia explained these were 5-toed socks and insoles she invented to wick away sweat from the feet. Because she imbued them with drying magic, her father often grumbled, "It's so hot in the summer, I don't want to wear socks." So she came up with these prototypes to try to help. Unfortunately, she never finished them until after he passed, but was happy for Wolf to make use of them. With one of his comrades, Drino, surprised to see the socks, Wolf explained exactly what they were. Drino commented that the 5 toes made it look creepy, but hearing they kept Wolf's feet dry in these marshlands, he was astonished, because his feet were already drenched in sweat. Wolf offered a pair for Drino to try, and Drino was now ecstatic, feeling his feet no longer sweating. Wolf just asked Drino to let him know what he thought of them later. Hearing this, another comrade asked where these socks and insoles were sold, disappointed to discover they couldn't be purchased anywhere since they were prototypes. Thus, Wolf offered another spare set he had, now with the captain and another soldier curious about the foot fungus preventing pair. Wolf really wondered if foot fungus was that terrible since he never dealt with it himself, but a soldier who exclaimed the itchiness and the sweat would rob him of focus, and every step taken with it was horrid and uncomfortable. Then all the soldiers started begging for the sock and insole combo, and breathing a deep sigh, Wolf knew Dahlia had invented something big. On another day, the suppression force used their strategy and might to eliminate the frogs. In the evening though, Wolf's tent was full with soldiers lining up, excited to share their experiences with the magical socks and insoles. Their feet stayed dry with no sweat or itch, helping them focus on their combat with the frogs. There were still many things they wanted to add though. Coming back to Dahlia, she was surprised to hear the soldiers requested 80 sets of the 5-toed socks and drying insoles. She was only expecting a report of his experience, but sure enough, he had the paper stack containing all of the soldiers' experiences. She was sweating as she wondered how things got so far. Partway through the reports, it actually started turning into letters of thanks, and all Wolf did was record the consensus of his men. Dahlia didn't know how to handle this many orders, so she was going to go to the trade guild for advice tomorrow. Wolf offered to go along, since his captain wanted him to hurry things along as well. He offered to become a guarantor. That way, he could increase their chances of being able to procure the appropriate materials. Dahlia accepted, even though it may only lead to rumors of the two having indecorous behavior. Wolf wondered if it'd be better for the two of them to keep a certain distance when they're in public. However, Dahlia didn't care what people thought of her, as long as results were produced and she was with the people who acknowledged her successes. The two continued to smile brightly, acknowledging the happy friend zone they were in. While signing paperwork at the trade guild, Dominic recommended Wolf inform his family he was serving as guarantor, while Gabriella pulled Dahlia aside privately into her room. It seems the captain of the monster suppression force had sent letters endorsing Wolf assisting Dahlia. Something like this has never happened before at the trade guild, so Dahlia needed advice on what to do. After Gabriella learned about the sock and insole situation, Dahlia explained she could only make 15 to 20 pairs a day. Unable to do more, Gabriella prayed for their success while suggesting they hire someone for assistance. The business table was full of negotiation, since they needed other workshops to help with the sock and insole production. Dahlia retained the rights to the products and was earning tons of royalty percentages on the sales. This was a big deal, since the product would become so popular it might even replace what every soldier wears in the kingdom, so they needed to create a lot of production tools to manufacture on a wider scale. Afterwards, Wolf was relieved that everything seemed to work out, but he had a suggestion on how Dahlia avoid interacting with nobles, since during the business deal, she had told Lord Fortunato, "I trust and leave everything to you." When a single lady says that to a nobleman, it can be taken as an expression of love. But of course, Dahlia only meant that she trusted the way he does business. The reason why it comes off romantically is because the line actually appeared in a popular soap opera, and thus quoting it became fashionable romance. Noble women would say it on the first night they spent together. That evening, Ivano was putting in his resignation at the trade guild with Gabriella. She had seen this coming, since he was more passionate about being a merchant. He wanted to work under Dahlia to help sell her products, and Gabriella approved, since he could figure out what kind of man Wolf is on her behalf. Later, Ivano met privately with Wolf, inquiring on what he thought about Dahlia. Wolf described Dahlia as an amazing magic artificer and his good friend, but wondered why Ivano was asking. Ivano told Wolf he was standing right where Carlo died, and when Ivano ran into him at the time, there was nothing he could do. Hearing this, Wolf's jaw dropped, but he got on his knees and prayed. He was thankful for that bit of knowledge, but Ivano said not to be, since perhaps he had mentioned it to see how Wolf would react. In Ivano's eyes, Dahlia is like a goddess clad in golden prosperity. He desired to stand beside her and help grow the company, and told Wolf he just submitted his letter of resignation to the trade guild to do just that. He was telling Wolf all of this because he wanted his recommendation to Dahlia. Wolf asked Ivano why he should, to which Ivano gave his credentials. He's the eldest son of a storied merchant company and worked at the trade guild for 16 years. He takes pride in his company management and trade skills. His family lost their business long ago, and seeing Dahlia's merchant company with no merchants, he couldn't stand to see her company's business potential fall. He thought Dahlia's inventions to be golden dreams that had the power to change the world, and pleaded for Wolf's recommendation. Wolf agreed, but only on 2 conditions. First, Ivano uses covenant magic at a church to make his vow binding that he will not intentionally disadvantage Dahlia or her company. And second, Ivano must protect Dahlia at all costs. Wolf wanted Dahlia's safety to come before her company. As a man, Ivano vowed to these things, so Wolf gave him a rare gold coin that commemorated the coronation. Later, Gabriella informed Dahlia a request from the chair of the Orlando Trade Company had come to see her. The Orlando Company apparently wanted to ask to be a distributor of Dahlia's foam soap dispensers, since they were becoming popular. And meeting with Araneo, he deeply apologized for the misbehaviors of his foolish younger brother Tobias. Dahlia forgave him, since it wasn't his fault. But even so, Araneo offered a baggie of 20 gold coins as an apology. So at Gabriella's advice, Dahlia accepted. He wanted to strike a deal to have the Orlando Company provide her materials for the next 3 years, regardless of rarity. In return, Dahlia wanted to procure Fairy Crystal as quickly as possible. So he agreed, but also wanted to chat with Dahlia in private about something. He handed her a unicorn horn, which he originally intended to be a wedding gift for her and Tobias, but thought to give it to her for all the troubles she's had. He heard this horn could be used to nullify any toxin and ease any pain. It was actually a request from Carlo, but he took longer to give it to her than he intended. He's sad she isn't his sister-in-law, but understands it's best for her. And thus, the two completed their business deal. All the while, Wolf was meeting with his brother, Guido, to inform his family about him being a guarantor of Dahlia's company. Wolf was originally going to meet with his dad, but since he got called to the royal palace, Guido is here in his stead. Wolf was fine with it, since he just came here to present his proof of guarantor for the Rossetti Company, which will soon be doing business with the Knight's monster suppression force. Guido was proud of the connections Wolf had made, and wanted to let him know their father had given Wolf this villa and its staff to do as he wished. Their father wouldn't mind if he used it to help the Rossetti Company as well. On top of that, Guido also offered to procure various materials for crafting, should Wolf ever need it. Setting down his tea, Guido mentioned this to be the first time Wolf had attempted to contact their father. Wolf had never really thought about it, but prior to this moment, he had never been inconvenienced in any way that required him to reach out to their father till now, and he hardly had any memories of him either. Their father allowed Wolf to live without worry for food, shelter, or clothing, and even permitted him to join the monster suppression force. That's all Wolf really needed. Guido continued to prod Wolf about if he was getting married, leaving the Scalfarotto family, and if he ever planned to renounce his scarlet armor and look for work outside the suppression force. Wolf gave about as plain answers as one would expect, having no marriage prospects at the moment, someday he'd like to see the world outside of ties to his family, and didn't have plans to quit his job yet. He was more curious as to why his older brother was so worried about him now, since they didn't have such a familial relationship before. Guido apologized. Knowing Wolf had been avoiding him all this time, Guido himself used the lack of opportunities to talk as an excuse to run from him until now. Wolf now realized his brother's unexplained behavior stemmed from a sense of guilt, most likely over the day his mother died. With Wolf having watched his mother get surrounded, he grabbed a sword to help her, but it was too late. Seeing the bandits surrounding him next, he jumped out in a rage. Guido felt guilty for that moment all this time and was now apologizing because had Wolf and his mother, Dame Vanessa, not protected Guido and his mother, they would have died. Guido felt immense guilt for not saving Vanessa. Wolf told him to raise his head and to stop apologizing, since Guido didn't do anything wrong. But Guido went on further, thinking if he had fought as well, maybe Wolf's mother might have survived. He continued to apologize both as a man and as Wolf's older brother. But still, Wolf wanted his brother to take back his apology. His mother fought that day because she chose to. She fought to protect them all. Saying he should have died instead was no way to repay the knight, Vanessa Scalfarato, and with that, Guido understood. The tension calmed. Guido thought Wolf had resented him the entire time, but Wolf assured him that wasn't true. Instead, that they simply hadn't had the time to meet was all. Guido still remembers the day Wolf went out and fought while he was frozen in fear. His mother clung on to protect him, and he couldn't throw her off. By the time he stepped out, Wolf had slain everyone, but to this day, he still saw Dame Vanessa and the fallen knights in his dreams. Wolf could see his older brother shaking, and thought back to the many times he had that same nightmare. Guido thought of himself as a contemptible older brother the entire time, but now the two could finally connect in their pain. Guido offered his help in matters of business and procuring materials, and Wolf was able to get any fairy crystals Guido would come by. Guido then mentions he also feels bad for only visiting their father a few times a year, and explains their father also visits Vanessa's grave monthly. Wolf was certainly surprised, realizing their father must have loved his mother more than he knew. Stepping outside after, Wolf now just noticed since meeting Dahlia, he hadn't had the nightmares of his mother dying even once. Elsewhere, Dahlia was doing business dealings in regards to her soap dispenser with Fermo of the Gandolfi workshop. He was impressed at the functionality of the soap dispenser, even testing it to shave. With its proficiency, he could now see there'd be less razor burn and stray whiskers with this device widespread. They did some negotiations. He added some specifics like making the nozzle larger and bottle more sturdier since grown men would eventually use it as well. And thus, they shook hands, becoming co-developers of the product. Later that night, she was imbuing magic into a necklace, but was having trouble for some reason. She was testing out the unicorn horn material, but it kept interrupting her flow of magic. The next day, she checked her hair before meeting Wolf at the gate. He presented her his mother's book about etiquette and conversations with nobles, hoping she'd find some use for it. But walking towards her place, he noticed Dahlia was stumbling. Did she perhaps hurt her leg? And when she turned, he noticed a bruise on her face, and he dropped everything. She tried to cover it, but all he could do was question who hurt her. He took a closer look, finding bruises on her right cheek and medicine patches on her neck, pain on her shoulder as well. She tried to explain this was a result of her own carelessness, but he hardly believed she'd get all these injuries by a simple fall. She finally explained she got blown back using a spell as the cause of all this, giving him a little relief from a potential heart attack. Inside, she presented a bracelet she made with skullfang. Skullfangs have an effect on wind magic, but when used as a material in imbuing, they demanded a tremendous amount of magical energy. She had tried to do something like this once before, but it drained her magic so badly then, she nearly fainted and ended up vomiting. Knowing this, Wolf was surprised she made another attempt, but she was confident since her magic and skills had improved from 4 years ago. She set precautions, even imbuing a fang in her bedroom just in case. She was successful, but it drained all of her energy, and putting the bracelet on, the tiniest bit of magic sent her flying into a wall. Wolf sighed, giving her an ultimatum. She either drinks a potion, or he takes her to the church for healing. She assured him it wasn't that dire, and before she made the bracelet, she made this necklace out of unicorn which reduced pain, so she wasn't feeling hurt at all. But still, he wanted her to drink a potion, so she finally gave in. When she thought about how many bottles of wine it would cost for her to drink one, she felt it was a waste. She apologized for making him worry about her though, but he felt apologetic as well for touching her without her permission. She didn't want that to trouble him, knowing it was out of concern for her. But even if she failed, she knew the worst that would happen was she'd faint. Seeing the bracelet now for himself though, Wolf wanted to try it on, thinking he wouldn't be sent flying since he didn't have much magic. Dahlia was sure he'd be fine, and with little magic reserves in his body, when he touched the ring, nothing happened. Dahlia rather it be sealed away. However, Wolf convinced her to let him keep it with the condition it be contracted to him by blood, meaning no one else could use it. Despite the potential dangers, Wolf was able to get Dahlia with her one weakness, her curiosity towards the invention. They pricked his finger, and Dahlia sealed the binding contract, making the ring his alone. Outside, Wolf tested the bracelet, propelling himself to a height at the peak of the tower. Bracing himself after his landing, Dahlia worried for him. However, he got up smiling, because he was feeling challenged in his body's strengthening magic, and now felt much easier to jump than before. He jumped again, over and over, with each jump becoming easier on his body than the last. But Dahlia needed him to stop before someone saw him. He was ecstatic with the ring, offering to buy it from her. However, she gave it to him as a token of gratitude for becoming a guarantor of her company. He was worried about her doing more dangerous experiments alone. That's when Dahlia explained the only people that could enter the gate were those who were magically registered. Thus, the two thought it'd be a great idea if he got entry to her place at any time. She's giving him the keys, guys. After officially registering him though, Dahlia gave quite the foreboding warning. If something ever were to happen to where she couldn't be contacted for some reason, he called a guard. Next, Dahlia decided to review the noble etiquette notes left behind from Wolf's mother. Wolf turned to the page containing things a woman should never say to a nobleman, such as, "Please remove your gloves for me. Please allow me to hold your coat. I'm so tired from dancing, I don't think I can move. In that case, I feel like it'd be best to hurry home and rest. Would you come look at the stars from the west window with me?" Wolf was getting so flustered from all the suggestive phrasing though. He had to have her stop reading, and boy, did Dahlia also get embarrassed. The bell then rang for a visitor, and outside was Marcella, delivering some clams. Back inside, Dahlia offered Wolf to stay for dinner, and luckily, he had some apple brandy to pair with it. The ducal Lady Althea had given it to him to share with a friend. The two ate and drank, celebrating the prosperity of the Rossetti company. While the two drank the brandy, Wolf explained the queen also loved it, and Althea sent her some every year. Apparently Althea is the queen's younger sister, but not blood related. Not knowing how many times she'd be able to taste this delicious liquor in her lifetime, Dahlia started drinking with much intent. Wolf laughed, comparing her to that of a squirrel, making her a little bashful. Dahlia then turned the topic to Wolf's boots, asking if they had any countermeasure magic such as purification applied. He himself had never heard of anyone doing that. Leather boots didn't dry quickly, so he tried not to wash them very often. When they were wet, he once tried to use a dryer, however the heat damaged the leather. Dahlia explained it'd be fine with a dryer at lower heat. The wind should not be warmer than the touch of a hand to prevent damaging the leather. She then adjusted a dryer's heat settings, testing it on Wolf's hand to be the perfect temperature. She dipped her father's old boots into some water, and inside she noticed a stinky sock, which she planned to burn in the future. Using a hose attached to the dryer, she was able to dry the inside of the boot with no damage whatsoever. Her next invention being completed, Wolf had plenty of instructions to give his friends in order to help prevent the spread of foot fungus. He questioned how she was so knowledgeable, making her apologize to her father in her past life, who always had foot fungus. Dahlia went to meet with Ivano later, who was doing all the merchant planning for her products moving forward. He was surprised to learn she created this new invention in a span of 20 minutes, and being the marketing manager of the company, he needed any ideas she were to come up with as soon as possible. Ideas included making waterproof fabric lighter, a refrigerator that also had a freezer, magic devices for drying clothes, pots handy for cooking, and a home heater for winter. She also included a faux magic sword she was planning to make for Wolf, which Ivano explained would be problematic if the aristocrats or royalty were to discover she could make such things. In any case, he told her to keep it a secret. The schematics for that device be exported to foreign countries, or she could be taken in by the military. Ivano then handed his church-sworn contract copy to Dahlia. Reading it, she learned of all the things Wolf had Ivano promise, mainly that he was not able to disadvantage Dahlia or the Rossetti company. The two were looking forward to working together, with Ivano remarking Dahlia would someday surpass the amount of inventions her father made and make him proud. Meeting Gabriella later, who was reviewing all the work Ivano did in registering items, Dahlia tried to ask Gabriella to call off the debt she owed her father. Dahlia felt like she owed Gabriella for all the help she'd been getting, but Gabriella explained there was more to the debt she owed Carlo. He also knew ahead of time, and I'm quoting him here, "My Dahlia is the type who will want to repay her debts herself." So, wanting to stay in Dahlia's life, Gabriella accepted Dahlia's feelings of indebtedness towards her. Ivano then knocked, explaining the captain of the monster suppression force had sent a messenger to see the head of the Rossetti company. So, Vice Captain Griselda presented Dahlia a letter, and it seems she's received an invitation to the royal palace tomorrow. With the seriousness of royal etiquette, Gabriella took Dahlia shopping, taught both her and Ivano table manners, and had them read up on books containing proper ways to interact with royalty. The next day, with Ivano as her attendant, Dahlia was ready to go. On the ride to the capital, both Dahlia and Ivano were extremely nervous, especially because in Dahlia's mind, he seemed more like the head of the company than she did. Ivano cheered her on as she meekly waved him off. She waited inside of a guest room until getting jump-scared by a knock from none other than Wolfred, who arrived to escort her. Inside another carriage, Wolf explained Dahlia was invited because his captain wanted to express gratitude for the sock and insole combo he and his soldiers were able to use. The captain is a marquise, and actually meant this as more of a casual invitation. This gave Dahlia some relief. Inside the Monster Suppression Force meeting room, Dahlia exchanged greetings with Grat Bartoloni, the captain. She smiled, but she was nervous, knowing for sure she was going to trip over her words and mess up somehow. Sitting down, the captain presented all the men sitting as ones who had tested the 5-toed socks and drying insoles. They all decided to be here to offer their thanks to the head of the Rossetti company. Dahlia thanked them back, especially for giving her such detailed reports. Because of them, she now had the sock and insole combo being produced in large scale, and wanted to send them all finished products as a token of her appreciation at a later date. But they could have these ones she brought in the meantime. All the soldiers cheered, so grateful and now motivated to go on their next campaign. The captain then read a list of methods to effectively deal with the foot fungus Dahlia had brought up. Details included washing thoroughly using soap when bathing, cleaning and drying the feet thoroughly, and changing into clean pairs of shoes, different from the ones that gave them fungus. When she explained the fungus could linger in shoes, the men all became a gasp. Many of them always wore the same pair. Sharing boots was also a no-go. Ew. She then mentioned anything they touched with their feet in shared spaces, such as floor mats or shared towels, could all spread the fungus. That was enough for the captain to call the soldiers to burn all the floor mats and towels at once. Dahlia wanted to stop them, explaining they could just wash them properly and stop sharing. However, the captain was determined to tear out the evil fungus from the root. Then, another soldier had a genius idea. If you think about it, the root of evil was their own feet. They just needed to cut off their feet, then go to the church and have them regenerate new ones. Dahlia was losing her mind at the conclusions these men were coming to. She reiterated the fact that if they just followed her list, they'd be fine. But then, Wolf interjected, displaying full-on sympathy for Dahlia. He assumed the reason why this list was so detailed was because she had been suffering from the fungus all along, making her totally embarrassed, attempting to clear up the misconception. But he just couldn't understand at all. With Dahlia out of the room, the captain scolded him, because no matter how close he was with her, there are things you just don't say to a woman. He then gave the order that no one here breathe a word of this matter to Dahlia again. Everyone then took turns poking at Wolf, telling him if that's how he teased her normally, she'd eventually leave him. They wanted Wolf to get something to apologize to her, but shamefully, he admitted not knowing her favorite flowers or her favorite sweets. So, his squad mates recommended he go to a popular flower shop and have them make Dahlia a bouquet with lots of red. Then for sweets, buy some choux à la crème and decorative sugar for tea. He was dismissed early to handle the task, and while completing it, the squad mates admitted never seeing him this flustered before. While Wolf ran as fast as he could to Dahlia's place, the captain described a person's first love to be like a fever. The older you are, the harder it hits, and the stronger its after effects. Seeing Wolf this way, they all swore to not speak of it again. Dahlia plopped on her bed with heavy relief, only to hear a ring at her door. Outside, she saw Wolf waiting by the gate with the flowers, and she smiled at him. Presenting the flowers, he gave his deepest apologies, and she decided to let it slide. And with him presenting the choux à la crème, the two decided to enjoy them together. Wolf started asking about her favorite treats, and luckily, Dahlia loved exactly what he brought her, and cheesecake. Then, asking about her favorite flower, we learned she likes all of them, but particularly roses and gardenias. Wolf turned to the bouquet, questioning if she was named after the dahlia flower, to which she confirmed it was her father's choosing. She's heard that in another country, they call a single bloom Dahlia with a Y, and multiple blooms Dahlia, spelt like her name. But with her mother and father gone, now being all alone, she wondered if her name really suited her. After toasting to some white wine, Dahlia asked Wolf if he ever drank in the barracks. He explained they did it often, and when everyone started having fun, it would turn into a disaster. Basically, people start spilling their secrets, and no one present would speak a word of it to anyone. That was the rule. They often built camaraderie and solidarity this way. The two then decided to try this disaster here. The first person declares the disaster, while the listener places the palm of their dominant hand on the table or floor. This symbolizes if you speak it to outsiders, they can cut that hand off. With a coin toss, Dahlia was decidedly first. She spoke about how her mother went to her parents' home to give birth to her and never returned to Carlo. After Dahlia was born, her mother gave her to Carlo and went on to marry someone else. So, Dahlia had never known her mother. Wolf felt kinda bad, like he forced Dahlia to tell him such a secret. But she accepted it, thinking it'd be better if he heard it from her rather than someone else. Dahlia was told her mother loved her father enough to push him into marrying her. She wondered if her being born somehow broke that spell of love. But Carlo never once spoke ill of Dahlia's mother. When she was little, she only saw her father cry once. He'd fallen asleep slumped over his workbench, and beside him was a letter informing Carlo that Dahlia's mother had died of illness, and her funeral had already been held. That and the location of her grave were the only contents of that letter. Dahlia was pissed, and considered ripping the letter up. Then she wondered if her father had wanted to keep her from seeing him cry. She wondered if he cried in secret at times. She wondered if maybe he was still in love with her mother. Dahlia had no memory of ever meeting her, but she supposedly had the same hair color, the same color as the woman who abandoned her father. Wolf reassured Dahlia she was her own person, because children don't follow their parents forever, making her smile. Now, it was his turn. His mother was a knight who guarded a duke's wife, but perhaps thanks to her beauty and ice magic, she became his father's third wife. Apparently, because of Wolf's lack of magic, his father took no interest in him, so he learned the sword from his mother and joined the monster suppression force. When he was 10, they were attacked by bandits. 20 people died, including his mother. She and the other knights protected his father's first wife, he and his brother, so they all survived. After spending several days undergoing treatment at a church, Wolf returned and everything was over. All of the second wife's relatives had died, and she herself had joined a convent in mourning. Losing his mother was painful. Interacting with people made it hard for him to survive. But not long ago, he learned that his older brother suffered even more than he did. He never once considered his brother's feelings. He was glad he learned now, though. Otherwise, he would have gone on thinking he was the only one who suffered and kept running away. Wolf wanted a magic sword because he felt weak. He couldn't use magic and believed a magic sword would grant him strength. He wanted the nightmares to stop. His mother, lying on the ground, him, being unable to save her. He never wanted to witness that again. But now, he wanted to get stronger so he could surpass her. That's why he wants a magic sword now. Dahlia felt a bond in the tales they shared. She was determined to help make him a sword that would grant his wish. Wolf thanked her, and brought up wanting to visit his mother's grave. Dahlia admitted the same for her father. She then mentioned the nightmares she had occasionally, ones where even though there were people nearby, she didn't ask any of them for help. She'd just slump over her desk and die. Wolf swore next time she had that nightmare, he'd come to save her with everything he had. But she wondered how he would get into her dream. She appreciated the thought though. In that dream, the last thing she saw was her desk. Face down against it, that's all she could see. That's why she decided to live without hanging her head anymore. Wolf felt her determination. He brought up how she mentioned her name didn't suit her because a single flower is Dahlia with a Y, and more than one is Dahlia, her name's spelling. He felt while she may feel alone, there were still people around her. He couldn't explain it, but thought her name suited her much better than she thought. Standing tall, not hanging her head, blossoming up toward the sky, that's who Dahlia was to him. Eventually, the days and seasons came to pass. It had been a while since Wolf came to visit Dahlia at her place. On his last campaign, the suppression force had to squash a flock of harpies hunting sheep and children in a nearby village. Everyone came out safely though, with special thanks to the bracelet Dahlia made him. When the abducted children fell from the sky, he would use the bracelet to propel to the kids and bring them down. Dahlia was glad she could be of use. Now, she was ready to prototype a new magic sword. Last time, they used a black slime to make a short sword that couldn't be held barehanded. So her plan this time was to use yellow slime, which contained earth magic. The two got to work, making a solvent they could use. However, it didn't seem to have much effect on the sword and sheath. Dahlia sighed at the failed attempt, but then began thinking maybe she needed the unicorn's horn. She had another idea though. Since earth magic worked on black slimes, they could use this solvent on the first magic sword they produced. They dipped it in, and placing meat on the short sword, they could see there was no longer any danger. Wolf then tried holding it with his bare hands, and swinging it, there was no problems at all. It emitted water, and the sheath felt lighter. It was a success. They should have no problem applying this technique to a longer sword now. The celebration got interrupted though, as they saw the short sword moving like it had a mind of its own. Dahlia tried to reassure Wolf that it was just shaking because of the conflict between the elemental magic. There was certainly no sentience or any types of spirit haunting the sword. While cleaning up, Wolf spotted a box containing the scale of a mirror snake. It supposedly had properties that could deceive the eyes. A client was kind enough to send it to Dahlia, and she was surprised the shine was so beautiful and thought it was from a rainbow serpent. People say lanterns imbued with rainbow serpent scales allow you to see the future. She got excited, wanting to use the scale in her next project. But touching it, the scale spread and emitted a light that engulfed the whole room. She awakened in another room, finely dressed. And there, Wolf asked for the honor of dancing with her. She and Wolf danced with much beauty and grace on the dance floor. The two woke up from the illusion, wondering if it was or a future to come. Could this scale have actually been from a rainbow serpent? Wolf asked Dahlia if she wanted to dance, so I guess he must have seen the same vision. He then began thinking if there's a chance that was the future, he better start practicing his dance skills. The two said their goodbyes for the evening, with Dahlia exuding a sigh of relief. Later, during business meetings, Gabriella asked Dahlia how things were going with Wolf, making her choke on her tea. Gabriella then emphasized that upon finished production of the 5-toed socks, Dahlia would most likely receive various offers of marriage. She was not in the season of marriage and asked Gabriella to decline them all. With Dahlia heading home for the evening, Ivano explained his plans to raise Dahlia's status. You see, there would be problems with Wolf marrying her in the future, since he was the son of an earl. So, Ivano's goal was to raise Dahlia's status to that of nobility through her works. That way, she wouldn't have problems in the future. Back at home, Dahlia celebrated the success of her company in getting through her marriage annulment with Irma, Lucia, and Marcella. She wouldn't have gotten through it without them. The friends all toasted to their future endeavors, then ate and drank to their heart's content. We then see a young Dahlia with her father surrounded by the magic lantern's lights, and she cried, remembering how he talked so passionately about his creative ideas. Her father patted her head, imbuing his belief in her, and she woke up to the sunshine from her heartfelt dream. Later, Dahlia and Wolf decided to take a trip together, and she remembered her time riding in the carriage the day she had lost it all, making it to the gravesite. This is where the two parted ways, since their loved ones' graves were in different places. Wolf placed flowers on his mother's grave and told her the story of how he had mended things with his older brother, and learned their father had been visiting her grave. Wolf felt he had been such a child, and if his mother were still alive, she would have certainly scolded him. He then mentioned his friend, Dahlia, who he wanted to protect with everything. Dahlia rescued him from his aimless wandering and made magic devices to support him. He believed one day they'd create an incredible magic sword together. Dahlia visited her father's grave, presenting booze and flowers. Pouring wine to honor him, she talked about how things ended between her and Tobias, but knew her father wouldn't be mad at her with how things ended. She talked of all the people who supported her, and her brand new products that were in mass production. She mentioned not knowing his hobby of making people owe him favors. The head of the trade guild, Gabriella, Oswald, and there were probably others Dahlia did not know of yet. Because of how slipshod and casual her father was about everything, she felt him playing gallant out of her sight wasn't fair, but was truly grateful for him. Wolf remembered his mother asking him what kind of knight he wanted to be when he was little. He always thought she was asking about strength or speed, his style in battle. His answer was late, but now he knew he wanted to be a knight who could protect everything that was important to him. He presented his mother's sword. They say that when someone dies protecting someone else, they continue to protect their beloved beyond death. He chose to believe that, but he could fight on his own, so he wished for his mother to protect Dahlia if possible. Dahlia was glad her father was looking out for her, but didn't think she could keep going on this way. If she did, she'd always be the daughter he was worried for, and not a full-fledged artisan. She lacked magical power and technical skills, and didn't know how many decades it would take, but she wanted to become a magical artificer who surpassed him. She's made dear friends who support her, and knew she wasn't alone anymore. She swore to become the greatest inventor he could be proud of. Dahlia and Wolf then met up afterwards, joking about the seemingly sentient short sword they made the other day, and if Wolf would be the demon lord wielding it, she could be his witch at his side who helped craft it. The two giggled as they made their way together. Wow, what a sweet ending to this series. I wish there was more to it though. Is the way Wolf's and Dahlia's relationship progressing the right path, or should it have been done differently? Subscribe for more content. Also, watch this next video. It's me, ComfyTea. I'll see you all in the next one.